afternoon. Welcome to the February 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Law and Regulation Committee of the Roseville City Council. We'll have a silent roll call. And Mr. Becerra, would you lead us in the pledge?
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. This is an opportunity for anyone to make any comments on non-agenda items. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on. And the first action for the first item of business is the minutes of the prior meeting, which would have been the October 27th, 2021 on Regulation Committee meeting. If there are no, Councilman Mendoza, any changes to that or anything you saw in that?
Sure.
Well, if there's, I didn't see any as well, so let's just go ahead and move approval of those minutes by consensus. Can I do that? All right. I'm in training. Getting trained up pretty good. All right. Now we're going to the meat of the action. And I just read the staff report, and I'm exhausted. I don't know how you guys are doing it, but I'm exhausted. So, Mr. Walensky, would you lead us off with state and federal priority legislation for February 2022?
Be our pleasure. Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Hodeschelt and Councilmember Mendoza. I'm Mark Walensky, Government Relations Administrator, and I'm joined this afternoon for this presentation by Rob Becerra, the Police Department's Public Information Officer. Our presentation is an overview of the city's priority list of legislation and other areas of concern or interest. Briefly, by way of background, the legislature returned to the Capitol in early January to begin the second year of the legislative session and have introduced more than 2,200 new bills. We expect the legislature will focus on items during the session such as water, housing, climate change, impacts of COVID-19, and how to spend another significant budget surplus. The bills in this report are representative of the two-year bills on the priority list of bills that passed their House of Origin and several bills that failed. In addition, the report provides an overview of current state and federal legislation related to public safety, housing, land use, cybersecurity, state initiatives, and the federal infrastructure package. So at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Rob to provide the public safety bills.
Thank you, Mark. We anticipate, just based on what we saw in the 2021 cycle, that there's going to likely be several hundred bills that come out that have some sort of a public safety impact. I would say as a rough estimate, last time there were about 100 bills of the several hundred that hit our radar and we took a deeper dive into. About 65 of those bills we had significant concerns over, and then, as you saw from our approach, we identified those top 20 that we further went to see if we could negotiate change with our trade partners and our lobbying firms. I felt like we had a very good level of success last cycle with just a few pieces of legislation actually hitting the governor's desk, getting signed and moving forward. One of those was SB 2. I would say even to date, there is still negotiation going on with SB 2, that is the police reform bill. And I would say so far we feel very comfortable with some of those adjustments that have been made. It is to take effect in the spring, but true effect in 23. And I think that is some of the things that we're going to continue to track is the certification process of police officers and then the decertification process. So given that, of the bills that were carried over, 17 were identified as two-year bills. We put 2 on the staff report just to call out that we are paying special attention to because I think they highlight two really important pieces in public safety. Number one, again, is that it's the Law Enforcement Accountability Reform Act, AB 655, something that we will continue to watch to see how it goes through the amendment process. And then the other is AB 662, Mental Health Dispatch Response and Protocols. This one would have a likely change to how we dispatch officers to calls. It would also have an impact on our dispatchers, on the training that they would receive to be able to triage and then appropriately send the right resources. There is a significant effort that goes into dispatching something that would be considered a 5150 call, or something where someone would be a harm to themselves or others. And this bill works to clarify the language for how a dispatcher would dispatch a 5150 call and how an officer would respond to a 5150 call. I would say at this point, we are very interested just to see how this piece of legislation takes form. I will say we know the deadline has come and gone. We know that the legislation is there. And I would like to give a huge thanks to Mr. Walensky, who is reading all 2,200 pieces of legislation so that I don't have to. But we absolutely enjoy the relationship, the partnership we have in the government relations team, and we look forward to a successful cycle where I can focus in on the public safety legislation. That's all I have.
Yeah, and I know, I'm sorry, Councilman Mendoza?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed in the staff report, in addition, something that's fairly in the news a lot right now with the Attorney General and tracking of ghost guns and other things, assault weapons, other things like that are certainly on the radar.
We have, and I will speak to that because it is on the staff report, and thanks for reminding me, we know that the governor has signaled some pieces of legislation that he'd like to focus on, and you're exactly right, Councilmember Hadoschelt, ghost guns and the regulation, enforcement, and the ability to go after a manufacturer of ghost guns was something he signaled that he wanted the Attorney General Bonta to move forward with. We're interested to find that legislation and figure out how and if it did take legislative form.
So I was going to ask about this when I saw it pop up on the screen. I don't see anything on this, or I'm sorry, I have not heard anything to date. Maybe you have on where the ambiguity is on the I can't think of it now, 3D printing. So I know that these ghost guns, sometimes they can be considered ghost guns in various forms, but what about the ones that are actually 3D printed? Would this legislation include that? So,
and I would say that piece actually goes back to the signaling from the governor, and that is exactly right, is I think it would be extremely challenging to find if it would it be the computer programmer who built the program for that file of that ghost gun, which I would say I've not seen how that looks in legislative form, but that is something the governor signaled is that is on his list of people who he would like to track down and ultimately hold accountable.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And Councilmember Mendoza and I participated with the rest of the council earlier today, and Mr. Walensky and our staff in our annual strategic goal setting, and certainly goal C, I think should be moved up to goal A because our citizens really kind of count on our public safety as a core value, education and public safety as sort of the thing that attracts them to our community and keeps them here, whether they're working families or businesses. So, all right. And Mr. Walensky, before we hear your part of the report, I want to compliment you because for me, the I don't know how to make this a verb. The italics in here really helps kind of focus on what the staff's comments are on each of this. So I want to compliment you and all of the staff for doing that. That's helpful for this old man to focus in on what should be focused in on, so. Now, your portion of it, you have a portion of the report, Mr. Williams?
Absolutely, and thank you for the comment. And I'll let you know that actually at the end of last year, we have a meeting at the end of the year to talk about what we've done as a government relations team, what we've done well, what we feel we could do better. And one of the elements that we agreed upon was the ability to make our reports more digestible. And that format was one of the components. So thank you for your comments. I appreciate that greatly. With respect to other active priority bills, I'm going to talk about 5 bills that were 2-year bills that passed their House of Origin and remain active. Assembly Bill 411, with more than 11,000 homeless veterans in California and even more experiencing housing insecurity, AB 411 would provide assistance to veterans who are homeless or who need affordable rental housing to secure housing for themselves and their families. Staff is watching the bill to understand the outcomes and opportunities that might exist to help veterans in Placer County if this bond were approved. Assembly Bill 581 with respect to cybersecurity. Staff supports this bill due to the importance of a strong and integrated cybersecurity system. The National Institute of Standards and Technology is a respected cybersecurity standard setter, known for careful and thorough development of frameworks that help organizations understand and mitigate cybersecurity risks. Having a consistent, reliable standard for U.S. federal government programs is a logical guidance for the state of California as it implements its own cybersecurity programs. AB 916, with respect to zoning and accessory dwelling units, staff has taken a watch position on this bill to understand any changes the city would be required to make if the bill were signed into law. This bill increases the potential building height of an ADU, or accessory dwelling unit, a local government must approve ministerially from 16 feet to 18 feet if the accessory dwelling unit is proposed on a lot with an existing multi-story, multi-family development. Accessory dwelling units proposed on a lot with a single-family dwelling, regardless of the height of the existing dwelling unit, will remain capped at 16 feet. In SB 34, with respect to libraries and student success cards, staff has taken a watch position on this bill to understand the process requirements and funding that might be available to city libraries when entering into an agreement to implement a student success card program. And finally, Senate Bill 379, with respect to residential solar energy system. The city has taken an opposed position on this bill primarily because it would require the city to install a new online permitting program that would, upon completion of an online application, issue a permit for a residential solar rooftop system. This type of online checkbox format would preclude the city from any level of review of the solar system until installation of the system has begun and inspections are called for. With respect to state priority bills that failed, there are 3 that I'm highlighting. AB 115, this bill would have allowed by right development of housing and commercial zones without regard for use compatibility. Furthermore, the bill would have had implications on permitting commercial uses from locating in a commercial center because they would cause noise or other conflicts with an existing residential use. Senate Bill 765, the city had concerns with this bill as it would have allowed an applicant for an accessory dwelling unit to request an alternative rear and side yard setback requirement based on specific site topography conditions if the city or the county's setback requirements made construction of the accessory dwelling unit infeasible. And then finally, Assembly Bill 672. The city had taken an opposed position on the bill based on the concern that it would have morphed into a requirement that locally owned golf courses would have been required to convert public golf courses into housing developments. I want to note that the author has introduced the same bill this year, and it's included in our updated list of tracked legislation. With respect to initiatives, This year, as in many election years in recent past, a large number of initiatives have been submitted to the Attorney General to begin the process of qualifying for the ballot. Currently, there are 43 active initiatives that can begin collecting signatures. The following are 4 active initiatives that staff is following that would have significant implications to the city if they were approved. Initiative 10A1 would seek to limit when police officers may be shielded from liability for excessive force under the federal qualified immunity defense, and requires officers found guilty of excessive force be fired and barred from future service. Initiative 16A1 provides that city and county land use and zoning laws, including local housing laws, override all conflicting state laws except in certain circumstances related to the 3 areas of statewide concern. 1, the California Coastal Act; 2, siting of power plants; or 3, development of water, communication, or transportation infrastructure projects. This prevents state legislature and local legislative bodies from passing laws invalidating voter-approved local land use or zoning initiatives. Initiative 42A1, for new and increased state taxes currently enacted by 2/3 vote of the legislature, would also require statewide election and majority voter approval. Limits voters' ability to pass voter-proposed local special taxes by raising vote requirements to 2/3, and eliminates voters' ability to advise on how to spend revenues from proposed general tax on the same ballot as the proposed tax. And then finally, Initiative 41. It authorizes prosecutors to file felony or misdemeanor charges for thefts of any amount under $950, currently chargeable as felonies only in certain circumstances, against any person with 2 or more prior specified theft convictions, and adds mandatory sentence requirement enhancements for any felony resulting in significant property loss or damage. So staff continues to monitor the initiatives that are submitted to the Attorney General for review and approval, and will track those that are of concern to understand if the proponent is successful in qualifying the initiative for the ballot. Information on the initiatives is also shared with city departments that would be impacted by an initiative if it qualifies for the ballot and is approved by the voters. And then finally, with respect to the federal activities. As you know, late last year, President Biden signed the bipartisan infrastructure bill into law. The new law is historic in its size and allocates funding to over 350 distinct programs across more than a dozen federal departments and agencies. The White House recently released a detailed guidebook aimed at helping state, tribal, and local governments understand what funding is available, what to apply for, who to contact, and how best to begin building and upgrading critical infrastructure. The online version of the guidebook is found at the website noted on the slides, or www.whitehouse.gov/build. It is important to note that while the new law provides a tremendous level of funding for various types of projects and infrastructure improvement projects, much of that funding is still being distributed through existing programs or through a formula-based format. The structure will likely result in Roseville and other cities from realizing access to much of the funding available in the new law. Furthermore, in some instances, funding is provided directly to the state for distribution. Once again, based on the distribution format, funding might not be available at the local level if a city or a county doesn't meet the requirements defined to apply for the funds. Nevertheless, city departments are reviewing the guidebook to identify opportunities that may exist to fund projects that are important to the city. And in conclusion, government relations staff will continue to work with city departments to develop advocacy strategies for each of the bills on the tracked list of legislation, and staff will continue to bring the updated list to the L&R committee for their input and comments on any of the bills. And this concludes our presentation, and we're prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Member Mendoza?
I'm shocked that anybody in that dome south of us is this felony enhancement for theft. It's great. I'm pleased to hear that. I never thought I would hear anything. In fact, I thought it would go the other direction with the way our crime bills have have leaned over the past couple years. So that is good news to hear. I hope that tracks well and continues to move forward. That will be a good support mechanism. It will be another tool for us, being that we have such a high amount of retail theft in our city. I think that's important that we have that enhancement is even being proposed. But with every ray of light, there's darkness. I was kind of disappointed to read the lack of understanding of what our police officers encounter on a daily basis, and their continuing the continuing constriction of what they define as use of force. So I appreciate that we're watching all 4 of the items you brought forward on the state level, but those 2 items in particularly, I look forward to hearing reports back on, because I think that those do have, all of them, obviously the state and the federal, but those 2, particularly for me, I think have a great impact on our city and how we deploy our resources and how we continue to keep our residents safe. And so I'd be interested to see how those move through the process. So thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, a couple of questions, and we'll pick up on 41, which is the authorizing felony sentences. I noticed that the deadline for circulation is July 26th, and then the one above, 42A, the deadline for circulation is August 2nd. The process would not, if in fact the number of signatures required is verified. In likelihood, this would not be on the 2020, the fall. Form of a question, Bruce. Would there be a likelihood, given that how late it is in the process to put things on the November ballot, that these 2 would make the 2022 general election ballot? Can you come back to me with?
I can come back to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and thank you for putting, first of all, the number of signatures required, right? You get to 1 million signatures, that's, for a constitutional initiative, that's pretty significant. The other question I had is, you mentioned with respect to the funding, that given the fact that that this is distributed through existing programs or formulaic-based format, that it would prevent Roseville and other cities from realizing the funding. Is that because we're not already in the queue for this? Can you expand a little on?
Certainly.
So I understand better.
It is. It could be that because we're not in the queue. By and large, it's not because we're not in the queue. By and large, it's not. It's because we don't qualify for the funding as it's currently structured in the program or the formula. So we can't be competitive in the formula for various different reasons. Sometimes it can be demographic. Sometimes it can be how the requirement is structured for that money to flow to different communities. And if we're not competitive for it or within the formula at this point, the likelihood that we could be added to the formula is very slight.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. All right, any other questions?
No, sir.
I think we're good. We'll open it to the public. Seeing no public comment on this, we'll go to our next update. And we're joined by our new Roseville Electric Utility Director, Daniel Beans. I never know whether to put an S on the end of it, so anyway. So we'll start off with a presentation from Amber Blix.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Haudashelt, Councilmember Mendonça. Today, we're going to be going over some of the key dates. I know Mr. Walensky noticed that we're looking at a lot of the 2-year bills, so that's what a lot of my state report will focus on, with February 18th, just last Friday, being the bill introduction deadline. We will be reviewing all the many electric bills that have been introduced since then, but looking at the 2-year bills for this report. So the first bill that we will talk about today is AB 847 on the state side, then SB 396. Then we'll move to the federal legislation to talk about HR 6437, HR 5376, and then we'll move to a recent item, which was the state budget proposal on zero-emission vehicles. So regarding AB 847, this is a bill that I know we discussed at a previous L&R committee meeting last year, and this has to do with electrically conductive balloons. And the bill would require on or before September 1st of 2024, the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety and the Office of Emergency Services to adopt regulations governing the sale or manufacture of electrically conductive balloons in state. And this would really require, the regulations would require that these balloons pass a standard test without causing a fault at a high voltage electric distribution levels, which could cause an outage or an ignition. And then after September 1st of 2026, a business cannot sell or offer for sale, and a manufacturer cannot manufacture for sale in this state any celebratory balloon made of electrically conductive material unless it complies with the requirements of this bill. So right now we're expecting additional amendments to this bill in the very near future, and after we see those amendments in print, we expect to move to an official support position on this bill. We think this is a really good step in the right direction. However, the first hearing on this bill might not be until May or June of this year, given that the bill is currently parked in the Senate. Moving forward on SB 396, this is a bill that we were opposed to through our trade associations last year that would require the state to develop standardizing noticing content for electrical line clearances. It also require the timber to remain on site unless the landowner requests removal, and then the removal will be at no cost to the landowner. The department is really concerned that this bill would require a change to our existing processes, particularly our noticing content, that could be disruptive and costly. And amendments were put forward to this bill earlier this year that actually would have removed our opposition, but it's not clear that those amendments are going to be taken. And also, Assemblymember Mays, who is a co-author on this bill, just recently introduced AB 2940, which looks like it may become the new vehicle for this concept. So we'll continue to monitor both of these efforts and work through our trade associations to oppose this bill as needed, should it continue to be headed in a concerning direction. Moving on to the federal legislation, we have HR 6437, the Heating and Cooling Relief Act. And this bill amends the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP, and would authorize $40 billion per year for 10 years to fund the program. While this would substantially increase the funding for LIHEAP, which we would support, the bill would also create new restrictions against disconnections and late fees. And specifically, this bill would prevent disconnections from a household that receive assistance through LIHEAP for 1 full year, beginning on the date that the household received the assistance. It would also prevent collection of late fees for late fees for a 6-month period before and after the date that the funds were received through the program. So the city currently supports LIHEAP and additional funding for LIHEAP, but the restrictions on disconnections and late fees are concerning to us. And today we accept LIHEAP vouchers, and we offer payment agreements, extension, and partial payments regularly. And we're concerned that limiting disconnections may put our customers in a worse place in terms of accumulating greater past due balances, which we saw firsthand during the pandemic. So we've, at this point, provided these comments to our federal trade associations in advocacy of these points, and we'll kind of continue to monitor the trajectory of this bill. The second piece of federal legislation is HR 5376, which is the Build Back Better Act. Really, this bill has stalled after passing the House in November, but we're continuing to watch this because we think that the larger bill will likely be broken up into pieces to pass specific sections that are less controversial. There are energy provisions within the Build Back Better Act that included various tax benefits and tax credits for investments in renewable electricity, reducing carbon emissions, green energy, and energy efficiency. It's not clear at this point if there will be any direct benefits to our utility that could come out of these provisions, but these efforts are one of the reasons why we continue to track the proposal and see any specific outcomes that may come out in future legislation. And then finally, we have the state budget proposal. This is new, and this is on zero-emission vehicle, a package that was proposed by the governor that we'll be watching. The administration proposed $6.1 billion in new zero-emission transportation investments over 4 years, and the goal is to increase the access to clean transportation, reduce air pollution, and support disadvantaged and low-income communities. And the intended outcomes of this proposal are some of those on the screen there. Assist to over 100,000 low-income families through light-duty zero-emission vehicle or ZEV programs, 1,600 additional transit buses and infrastructure, 5,000 publicly accessible DC fast chargers with grid integration and resiliency throughout the state, 28,000 level 2 at-home chargers for apartments and condominium complexes, 50,000 level 2 chargers at single-family homes with a focus on low-income and disadvantaged communities. So a significant portion of this funding will go to the California Air Resources Board and the California Energy Commission, and we're continuing to watch for the budget trailer language that will specify how these funding opportunities will work out. But in the meantime, our trade associations have been supporting the funding, supporting transitioning to zero-emission vehicles and recognizing that POUs, publicly owned utilities, should be eligible to apply for and receive the various pots of electric vehicle-related infrastructure funds. And with that, that concludes my report.
Questions?
A lot of stuff going on. No, thank you. Very good report.
So just the beginning, right?
Just the beginning.
Is today the 23rd? Yeah, just 5 days, and yeah, a lot ahead of us. So thank you very much for your report. Next, we'll hear from Noel.
Great.
Oh, I'm sorry. Comment. No comments. No public comment.
Once, not 3 times.
Oh, okay.
Great. Good afternoon, Vice Mayor and Councilmember Mendoza. I'm going to switch things up a little bit on you from my written report. That focused really on legislation, an update on the legislation that was moving forward from last year. Since the bill introduction deadline was just last Friday, today I thought I would focus on several newly introduced bills, so it's a little bit more contemporary information. Before I jump in to talk about those bills, first, I just thought I'd give you kind of an overview. As Rob mentioned, there's been over 2,000 bills that were introduced just this year, with a majority of them, over 2/3 of them, that were introduced in the last 3 days of last week. So
All right, can I have that number again?
it's over 2,000 bills that were introduced since December. Over 2/3 of them were introduced in the last 3 days. So Thursday, Friday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of last week. So we are currently reviewing all of them. I've done a cursory review and just thought I'd give you kind of a trend of what I'm seeing that EU is going to be facing this next year. One of those is water rights. This has become a hot topic with the drought that's been talked about all year long. A number of bills on water quality, air quality, zero-emission vehicles and their infrastructure, SGMA, which is the Groundwater Management Act, as well as extended producer responsibility. Many of these bills are actually still in what we call spot form, which means the actual bill language has not put into the bill yet. So we have an idea of what's going to be introduced, but we don't have a lot of substance to go from. But with that, I will move on to the bills that I'm covering today, all of which are actually being. The first measure is AB 2142, which is dealing with the turf replacement rebates that our customers receive and their taxability. What This measure is being sponsored by the Association of California Water Agencies, and currently any customer receiving rebates of $600 or more in a calendar year from an entity like Roseville is subject to paying taxes on that amount. This would make rebates that our customers are receiving for our turf program would end up having to pay tax on them. The successful passage of this bill would result in a benefit to our customers. As we're participating in a work group with Aqua, we are encouraging them to try to expand this to other items like water closets, washing machines, dishwashers, and other fixtures, and actually irrigation controllers. This is important because as the state is implementing the conservation legislation, they're really focusing in on indoor water use and the efficient use. And so we're seeing them looking to ratchet down on what our indoor budget for water use is going to be for Roseville. So our conservation group may be looking to switch up the types of rebates that we're offering to our customers. The next measure is AB 2247, which is dealing with PFAS products.
Oh, I really wanted you to pronounce both of those words. So let me take it. Perfluoroalkyl. Alkyl.
And poly. You saved, well, I think Councilmember Mendoza saved me last time from trying to pronounce it. So I just thought I'd fast forward to PFAS.
PFAS.
This measure is actually being sponsored by the California Association of Sanitation Agencies and would require the development of a publicly accessible reporting platform beginning January 2024. Why is that important? Because by March 1st of 2024 and annually thereafter, any manufacturer of PFAS or anybody creating a product that uses PFAS as a component to be sold in California would have to register that product on that registry. This is important because these are what the state and the federal government are all calling forever chemicals and are getting into our water and wastewater systems, and increasingly are looking to water and wastewater providers like Roseville to be responsible for the additional treatment and removal of the chemicals. It's important for the state to gain a better understanding of where and how these chemicals are being used, so those responsible for introducing these chemicals into our environment can then appropriately be held responsible for their cleanup versus passing that burden on to our ratepayers. The next measure is AB 2440, and it actually has a companion bill, SB 1712, which are being sponsored by the California Product Stewardship Council. This bill would prohibit any person from knowingly disposing of a lithium-ion battery in the trash, and requires that the disposal of these batteries and the embedded batteries to be properly placed in receptacles for recycling. This is important due to the safety concerns for our refuse drivers, as these products, when they're not properly disposed of, can and have actually sparked fires in trucks, in transfer stations, and in landfills. Next, I'm going to cover a few regulations that have been very active of late. The first one at the state level is the Low-Income Household Water and Wastewater Assistance Program. It's also known as LIWAP. This program was passed as part of last year's budget to address arrearages, utility arrearages specifically. California received $116 million for this program specifically, and it is meant to complement the other water and wastewater arrearage programs that have already been underway, which was the California Water and Wastewater Arrearages Assistance Program. It is being administered by the Community Services Department, and it is for income-eligible water and wastewater customers. Last week, we participated in CSD's first meeting on its implementation just prior to the release of the draft guidelines. The guidelines actually mirror as much as possible the LIHEAP program, which is the energy program. The one big difference is that CSD has contracted with Horn LLP, which is an accounting firm, to actually implement this new program for them. What Roseville will do is sign up with Horn to receive direct deposits for customers who have been qualified to receive funding by a local service provider. And that's similar to the LIHEAP program. The LIHEAP program has local service providers, they do all the qualifications, and then they send it to CSD. This will just be sending it to Horn instead. CSD is actually anticipating that customers will be able to begin applying in May, or at the latest, they said, it would be in June. And Roseville customers will reach out to our local service provider, which is Project Go, who actually is located just down the street at 801 Vernon Street. To qualify, customers have to be at or below 60% of the state median income. They can receive up to $2,000 for water, wastewater, as well as stormwater arrearages, as well as current charges, late fees. It's really meant to bring them up to whole, and so they don't have any past due balances. And they can receive that benefit one time. Roseville's billing department has been amazing through both the arrearages program and this program. They have already begun the process to sign up with Horn to receive our direct payments from them. So once our customers are able to start applying, they are ready to start accepting those payments. So really excited to help those who need the assistance receive it. The next program is the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience program, most commonly called the SAFER program. And the State Water Resources Control Board has recently released a draft report on the drinking water needs assessment. A little bit about the SAFER program. It was established in 2019 by Senate Bill 200. The purpose was to address the drinking water crisis that was highlighted during the 2015 drought of the small water systems in disadvantaged communities who were unable to deliver clean water. Under this program, the state is to develop an annual expenditure plan to assure equitable access to safe, clean, and affordable water. The expenditure plan is based upon a drinking water needs assessment. And only entities with 3,300 connections or less can actually qualify for this funding. So in this new draft guidelines for the needs assessment, the water industry has become very concerned because they're proposing to expand this program to include large community water systems like Roseville that are more than those 3,300 connections, which was never the intent of the legislation. In addition to adding the large water agencies, they've proposed to remove 5 risk indicators and add in 8 new risk indicators, one of them being contaminants of emerging concern, and another one, which is concerning to us, is percentage of residential arrearages. We just feel this is not appropriate given the state had a moratorium on any shutoffs during the pandemic, and a lot of customers had arrearages. And so we think this is going to give a false indication of need based upon an outlying circumstance. So we are working with our statewide trade associations to provide feedback to the State Water Board on this. Lastly, I'll provide an update on the federal lead and copper rule. I previously shared with this committee some of the concerns we had with the federal regulatory changes to the lead and copper rule. The main concern being responsible for plumbing on the customer side of the meter. while this issue hasn't been fixed, we do anticipate some changes in the future regulation. However, in the meantime, the regulation did go into effect on December 16th of this past year, with the first compliance deadline for water agencies being October 16th of 2024. EU staff has been participating in federal workshops on compliance with this new rule and are actively preparing for the first compliance date of completing a comprehensive service line inventory that has to identify the presence or actual absence of lead service lines on both the public and customer side of the water meter. And if a lead service line is found, then we have to provide a plan for their replacement and removal. As the compliance date nears, staff will be happy to come back and provide an additional update on our progress. Lastly, I'm going to cover, hopefully, some good news. A couple of grants that Roseville Environmental Utilities Water Department is applying for. The first one is a state grant through the Department of Water Resources. Last year, we advocated for $200 million as part of the state's budget for this program. We submitted a grant application for our joint project with PCWA, which is part of building resiliency and reliability for our water utility. This past December, DW awarded their Phase 1 grants. Unfortunately, our project was not selected in that first round. However, the Regional Water Authority was awarded $650,000 to complete the planning of the Sacramento Regional Water Bank. Even though we didn't receive funding in the first round, we were automatically entered into the second round, and we're anticipating notification any day now as to whether we were successful in that pursuit. We're very hopeful. One, that's our project with PCWA is exactly what that funding was written for, and it also plays into the Sacramento Regional Water Bank as well. So we're cautiously optimistic on that one. And the second one is the Economic Development Administration, U.S. Economic Development Administration. And this is for a grant for our Barton Road solar energy and storage project. This project will actually provide a reliable and sustainable backup power generation source for Roseville's only surface water treatment plant. The reliability of power to this facility has actually diminished over the past few years as PG&E has been implementing the public safety power shutoffs due to wildfire hazards, as well as the instability of the power grid due to a lack of available power resources. I want to take a moment to say all of our facilities that are within Roseville Electric's service area do not have the same problem with the reliability of energy. So EU is nearing completion of our grant material and will likely be taking the application to the full city council in the April-May timeframe. And we're really excited because we're receiving letters of support from our local community, businesses, as well as our full delegation of representatives at the federal level, Senators Padilla, Feinstein, and Congressman McClintock. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on what I presented or what I had in my staff report.
Councilmember Mendoza, any questions?
Great report. Two things for our contestants playing along at home. The cash for grass, just so there's no confusion for our residents, that's the cash for grass, right?
Yes.
The turf replacement is the same as the cash for grass?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
And then the other one, the copper and lead pipe legislation that you just touched on right before the last bullet point.
Yes.
So please correct me if I'm wrong, which I hope I am. But if I heard you right, if the copper pipe is on the customer side and it's found if it's found to be located on the customer side, Roseville's on the hook to remove and replace those?
At this time, that is the way it was written. However, the federal government is looking at some revisions. Actually, California is a little bit ahead of the federal government. We kind of have actually already done most of this, except for the federal regulation goes just a little bit further. We've already done an inventory of our lead service lines on the public side. What we don't know is what's on the private side.
So this is twofold. So the other one, I'm envisioning some of our older neighborhoods. There's often times where we have pipes that go through foundations. Some of these older homes, the way they were built and designed. Is there any sort of consideration on the government side as to capping what our costs here? I mean, and we have to work with the homeowner too. I mean, some of these could be very costly, very intrusive, to get to the point where we get beyond the copper or the lead in this particular case, to get to a point where we could actually sync up to that and create a clean, what they're defining as a clean water pipeline to the customer. Is there any discussion on what that cap may or may not be?
No.
Beautiful. Okay.
My understanding it is from the meter to the building, but does not include.
So it would just be from the meter. So we're not going all the way back until
It would be to the home.
okay. But if how far into the home are we expected to go? Did they define that?
No. And we do need to be working with the customer because it makes no sense to be replacing a portion and leaving
Right.
other lead pipes and fixtures within the home.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in some cases it would be virtually impossible, depending on how much pipe was laid between the meter, to get to a point where you could tee it off or use an elbow to get to a copper or non-lead pipe fixture. Boy, it just kind of seems like there's liability here of great proportion on the city.
Let me ease your mind. It sounds like there's going to be a conflict between the federal and the state language, right?
There may be.
Maybe. There's likely. Right? Because California is always first. Before the Federal Clean Water Act, there was Porter Cologne in 1967 or 68.
Yes.
So California's always ahead of it. So.
And it is a little bit of a smaller pool of homes, relatively speaking, in Roseville because of legislation that was passed eliminating the use of lead in any fixtures. That was in 1980. So the real focus is on pre-1980.
Right.
So it does limit, especially in a growing city, kind of where the risk may lie.
I would assume this would trigger, on the real estate end and contractual obligations, having to disclose this like you would anything else in the sale of a property. And if the customer chose to fight us on this, I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, but the way this was presented and the way that it seems to be worded leaves a lot of gray area that I would be curious as this makes its path, through the powers that be, what they're looking at, if they really thought this out, because it's not just us. I mean, throughout the state, there are much older homes than we have here in Roseville that are going to be impacted by this. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I got nothing.
Okay.
Any public comment? Seeing none. The council, I believe that's all we have for today, and we will stand adjourned until the March 23rd meeting.
I'm looking. March 23rd.
Here's something I learned a long time ago. February and March, the dates are the same and the days of the week are the same.
Well, thank you for that. So the next meeting will be March 23rd.
Unless we stand adjourned till then.
Leap year.
There we go.
There's always an
There we
exception
go.
to the rule, Bruce.
Still leap year?
No, not this year. It's not. Not this year.
Yeah, fell
Thank
for
you,
it, Michelle.
everybody. Yep. get some rest.